I've been a truck driver for the past 14 years. Long stretches, overnight runs, early sunrises in random parking lots. You get used to being alone. You get used to silence. You even get used to the weirdos. But what happened to me last October wasn't just weird. It was the kind of thing that makes you change routes permanently. I was on a run from Salt Lake City to Spokane, hauling metal racks for a warehouse installation. About an 8-hour trip. I left late in the evening to avoid traffic, clear skies, smooth roads, no issues.
Around 2:15 a.m., I stopped at a rest area off US Route 95 in Idaho.
It was one of those tiny ones. Just a bathroom, 2 soda machines, and a row of pull-in slots for semis. There were no lights other than what your headlights hit, and there were no other trucks. The building was dark, but the door was open. Normally, I'd have kept driving. I've seen enough shady stuff at night rest stops to know better. But I really had to piss, and I figured I'd be in and out in 30 seconds. I left the engine running and my lights on. As I approached the building, I noticed something strange. The door was open inward, not swinging with the wind, held there propped. Inside, it was pitch black. I pulled out my phone flashlight. The second I stepped through the doorway, I smelled something metallic, not blood. Worse, like cleaning fluid, trying and failing to cover it up. The urinals were stained. One of the sinks had a shattered mirror, and on the back of the far stall door, someone had scratched words deep into the paint. Close the door, or she'd get in. I turned around and left. Didn't even pee, just noped out, back to the truck. Except when I reached the driver's side door, it was open. I froze. I never leave it open, ever. I climbed in slowly. Nothing seemed moved, but I checked everything. Under the seats. Glove box, nothing. But on my dashboard, sitting perfectly centered, was a fresh Polaroid photo. It showed my truck, from behind. Taken from somewhere in the trees, and in the photo, there was someone standing outside the bathroom, just behind me. I looked up and turned the high beams toward the tree line. Nothing. I hit the locks, floored it, and got back on the highway. About 20 minutes later, I pulled into a gas station that had surveillance and light. Told myself I was overreacting. Maybe someone played a prank. Maybe I'd parked at a trap site, but no one followed through. That was until I checked the passenger side step. There were scratches on the metal, fresh, like someone had climbed up and slipped. When I got back home 2 days later, I sent the photo to a buddy of mine in local law enforcement. He asked for the location. I told him. He said he'd check into it. A week later, he called me back. Said he couldn't find any trace of a rest area at those coordinates. So I went on Google Street View. I found the same stretch of road, zoomed in on the bend, and the rest area. The one I stopped at, it's blurred out like someone intentionally censored it. Even the overhead satellite image shows trees. But no building. The last part is what still keeps me up. 2 weeks ago, 3 months after the incident, I found another Polaroid in my mailbox. No envelope, no stamp, just placed there. It was me, again, in my truck, sleeping. Camera angle, above my cab. Shot had to be taken from another rig, or a drone. But the part that makes my skin crawl, there's something in the lower corner of the photo, just barely visible, a handprint. Pressed up against the window of my sleeper, and I sleep with the curtain closed. This happened in the fall of 2020. I was driving for a small regional freight company based out of Oregon, mostly doing West Coast routes, Washington down to California. One night, I was hauling furniture from Eugene to Modesto. It wasn't urgent, so I figured I'd break the trip up and sleep halfway. The weather was already cooling off, and I didn't want to risk falling asleep behind the wheel. Around 12:45 a.m., I pulled off the main highway at a tiny truck stop, about 30 minutes south of Redding. I'd never seen it before, which was weird, because I'd driven that route a dozen times. It has no pumps, just a couple faded red signs, one vending machine, and a gravel lot with a few old parking spots for rigs. There were no other trucks parked there. That should have been my first warning. I backed into a space, cut the engine, and sat there with the radio on for a bit. The only light came from a single flickering bulb above the office, which looked like it hadn't been used since the early 2000s. No clerk. No other people, but the power was on. I went to stretch my legs. The vending machine didn't work. I figured whatever. Maybe it's just a quiet stop. I got back in the truck, locked up, and shut my eyes. I hadn't even fallen asleep yet when I heard gravel crunching outside, footsteps slow. I peeked through the curtain. A man was walking between the trucks, except mine was the only one there. He wasn't walking toward the building. He wasn't looking for help. He was circling my rig. I stayed quiet, didn't turn on a light, didn't move, just watched. He stopped at the passenger side door and stood there for a full minute, staring up at the cab. Then, he started tapping. Just once every few seconds. Slow, deliberate tap. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I caught the shape of something long in his hand. Maybe a crowbar, maybe a tire iron. Then the tapping stopped. I leaned forward just enough. To peek out the side mirror, he was gone. No footsteps, no sounds, just gone. I stayed locked in the cab for 2 hours. Around 3 a.m., I finally worked up the nerve to peek outside again. The man wasn't there. The lot was still empty. I decided to just leave. No sleep. Just go. When I stepped out to check my tires and clean my windshield, I found something under the passenger side door. A Polaroid. It was a photo of a man asleep inside a truck cab, taken from just outside the window. The timestamp said 2:06 a.m. I nearly threw up. I started the truck and drove straight to the next state-run rest stop, well lit, with cameras. When I parked, I checked every inch of the cab, nothing, but I couldn't stop thinking about the photo. The guy in it, he looked like me, but the angle was weird. Too high to have been taken from the ground. Like whoever took it had climbed onto the side mirror to get the shot. I checked my passenger side mirror. There were scuff marks, 2 of them, like the soles of someone's boots. I reported it to local law enforcement. They didn't seem too interested, but they said I wasn't the first to describe that rest stop. One deputy asked if I remembered the name, so I told him. He frowned. He said that place was shut down in 2009 after 2 drivers were murdered. There, you sure that's where you stopped? I showed him the Polaroid. He stared at it for a long time. Then he said, we found one of those once. Same angle. But the guy in the picture was dead. To this day, I don't stop at unmarked truck stops, and I always check my mirrors when I park, because sometimes, if I look too long, I swear I can still see that shape in the reflection, a figure in the dark, climbing back up.